few months ago, in the spring of 2014, I had a great deal of concern whether or not Maharishi would fulfill his last wish before he officially retired from the movement. He had a conversation with Bevan Morris, and Bevan was saying, Maharishi, don't worry about our ability to ensure maintaining the purity of the teaching, because we have all your tapes, all the recordings of your lectures. We have it all down on video and audio recordings. And Maharishi didn't accept that as being adequate to ensure the maintenance of the purity of the Transcendental Meditation movement. Instead, he kept insisting that we had to have 8,000 siddhas practicing Transcendental Meditation in 3 different locations on the planet and performing various Vedic rites and throughout the day, so that they could wield an influence, a harmonious influence, throughout society that would ensure, he insisted. And Bevan kind of thought that was a tall task because he didn't think it would be that easy, but Maharishi insisted this must be done and it must be done now. And so my concern was, one of the fallouts is that I remember one of the stories Charlie Lutz used to say was that it was a challenge for the movement to keep the young pundits in the program without leaving, because one of the issues was that they selected Brahmin boys, at least in the facility in India, from among the very poor, who had no education. They were lucky to have 1 meal a day, and so they were providing them 3 meals a day, a roof over their head, clothes and medical care, and something productive to do, and training. And once they were involved for a little while, the city life beckoned to their desires, and they would leave the program and go their own way. And this would deplete the inventory of pundits. And so they were constantly under pressure to replace the ones that left, let alone increase their numbers, because the movement has yet to reach 8,000 in any one location, let alone in 3 locations. I think the top number was 2,000 in any one location at any one time, on a lengthy basis. I mean, we have succeeded for a short duration for several thousand at a time. 7,000, 8,000, I think, was in 1984 in the United States, but not for any sustained period of time. So this was my concern a few months ago in considering this problem, and I began to realize that I was having a vision of what will be, and not just in the distant future, but in my lifetime. I will see it happen. And it will be, and so I started to wonder, okay, so what are the details of this? How is it going to be? And so here is my view or supposition of how it will be. A few modifications to the various details to how to, of implementation. And one was that, okay, one of the things you try to do when you've got resistance from people, society, whatever, is to go with it instead of fighting it and trying to go in the opposite direction. We still want to maintain the purity, the essence, but the mechanics, the management, the people management aspect, we have to be a little flexible. And so what was I thinking? Okay, well, if people don't want to stay with the program for very long, certainly not a lifelong commitment, then why not take advantage of that tendency and put a limit on the time length? See, in Israel, everybody is obligated to serve in the military, both men and women, but they only serve for a couple of years, and then their time is done, and then they're on call, on whatever it's called, the term, on emergency call. But the service time, the obligatory service time, is limited, but everybody serves. So I'm thinking, okay, if they want Brahmin boys, and at the current, traditionally only boys were initiated into meditation in days long past. But Maharishi has not limited himself to the male population alone. He has initiated both men and women. In fact, both men and women are teachers of Transcendental Meditation and who head various TM centers across the planet. So I'm thinking, okay, what if we open it up to both the male and female population, but because the requirements of these people dedicated to serve in their capacity of performing Vedic rituals throughout the day, this is their vocation in activity, this is what they do outside of meditation, why not restrict it again to the youth, the young, who have pure nervous systems? And of course the minimum age is 10 years for boys and 9 years for girls, because this is when they are given their sitting technique. And this is scientifically, I read this in a Discover Science magazine, that this is when the nervous system fully develops. And traditionally, only boys were given mantras and meditation paths in India in the last golden age of India, and at the age of 10, because this is when the boys' nervous systems would finish developing. So traditionally, since girls were never given the opportunity, it was never recognized that their time for maturity of the nervous system was a year prior to that of boys, on average. So I would imagine training could begin at this point, because you obviously can't become a pundit overnight. And so the time of commitment would involve a certain length of time for training and a certain length of time, or continuing training for that matter. It may be just ongoing, and then the person is given increasing responsibilities and duties as their training progresses. But their time for service would be limited. So let's say 2 or 3 years at the most. And then they're free to leave. In fact, at a certain length of time, they may be required to leave after a certain length of years, so that they don't stay on, so that it won't be expected that anybody will stay in the program. And the other issue I had was that there are 10 billion souls associated with this planet at this time, and only 6 billion are incarnate. The other 4 billion are in the interlife, in the heavenly plane. And it is all the people associated with the planet that we have to redeem, shall I say, by having the square root of 1% of the population practicing Transcendental Meditation twice a day in the TM City program, twice a day, along with doing performing Vedic rites and ceremonies to help purify the atmosphere. Because, this is where I get my standard from. It isn't just that the square root of 1% of the population is truly 10,000, not 8,000, because we have actually 10 billion souls associated with this planet, not 6. But I take as my standard a second source, and that is that Maharishi was the secretary to his guru, Gurudev, the Shankaracharya of northern India at the time, Brahmananda Saraswati of Jyotirmath, and this was in the sometime, and this was up to 1953. So I think for a length of time, somewhere more than a decade, he was Shankaracharya. Well, early on in his career as Shankaracharya, I mean, here's the man who was so pure of nervous system that 160 years, this seat in northern India, it's kind of like the Pope in Rome, where they have 4 Shankaracharyas. In India, one in each of the 4 cardinal points of the compass. And the seat in the north is considered the heart, and it was first established by the most esteemed disciple of Adi Shankara, namely Trodakacharya, I believe was his name. I hope I have that right. And because he was not a man of intellect, he was a man of the heart, and he became enlightened simply because of his unswerving devotion to his master. So this seat in India had gone vacant for 160 years because nobody was found qualified to fill that seat until Maharishi's master came along, but he was in the forest and he didn't want to come out of the forest. They tried for decades to get him to come out of the forest and fill the seat. Well, eventually he conceded and he filled the seat for a mere short number of years before his passing in 1953. But early on in his filling that office, Maharishi, acting as his secretary, organized surrounding, or in regards to his master, as the pivotal point, he organized a gathering of 10,000 pundits, Vedic pundits, to gather together in India to stop World War II. And this was before the end of World War II. And I never paid much attention to this story until I found out very recently from William Lyne, Lyne, who has a book on Amazon called The Occult Ether Physics, in which he describes the end of World War II as a stalemate, not as a clear victory on our part. And he goes into the details, and the details are pretty scary. Scary that it was such a stalemate, scary that we came so close to having our population and many of our, at least our eastern seaboard cities, annihilated with neutron bombs. And this is something that doesn't get reported in the media, just like a lot of things don't get reported because it's afraid we might get scared. But we came that close to utter destruction at the very end, just before the very end of World War II. Well, knowing that it is all wars are all based on the agitation in the environment that we create. Mother Nature doesn't create anything like that at all. She creates nothing but harmony. But we create that agitation, and then it builds, and then wars and natural catastrophes break out. So because of Transcendental Meditation, because of Maharishi coming out to the West and giving us Transcendental Meditation, it has made it a whole lot easier for us to avoid the natural catastrophes that had been predicted by Edgar Cayce and Nostradamus. We still have a few, and I think for the main part our catastrophes are self-made. Well, they're all self-made, but I mean they're coming from mostly from the imperfections latent within society, and not so much from natural disasters. But be that as it may, we've avoided a lot of catastrophes, but we still don't have the golden era established and firmly established for thousands of years, because we don't have the square root of 1% of the population doing the things that I've already described, and then having 2 additional locations as a failsafe. So 30,000 divided up 3 ways, 10,000 in each location. So my standard comes not only from taking the square root of the 1% of the population of all souls hovering around this planet at this time, but also from this prior point in history in which we actually had 10,000 pundits gathered together in around, I think it was 1942, if I'm not mistaken, performing Vedic rituals for, I don't know, several days, I think it was, or a couple of weeks, to bring an end to World War II, and it did eventually. The Nazis made various mistaken errors of judgment that foresaw, created the foundation for them losing the war. Thank goodness. So these kind of issues came up in my mind, and I felt, okay, so it has to be 10,000 people in 3 different locations on the planet. It has to be obligatory for both genders at a certain coming of age, and limited in duration, because frankly, if you obligate people, you're not going to need to keep them for very long. So you limit them by age category. Once they reach a certain age, then you ask them to leave, or you ask them to leave if they want to, unless they want to stay on. In managerial positions, administrative positions, they could stay on, but those who practice the rites should be the newcomers, although the people who train them, again, could be part of the staff and the administration and so forth and so on. So those kind of people can stay on to run and manage the implementation of the situation, but those who actually perform the rites should be the newcomers, the ones given a fresh chance to become involved. And so in my concern, I was dwelling on this, and I saw it literally as a vision in which I was reassured that Maharishi's desire, his last wish, will not go unfulfilled. I don't have to worry, and nothing need be done. I simply sit back and wait to witness it come about. It will happen in my lifetime. And I'm 57, so I don't expect to last more than 20, 30, 40 years at the most. I mean, that's you know. So I'll take a guess within 10 or 20 years, but I don't know. I don't know that. I only know I will live to see it. That much I remember of. And it was a very clear vision. So when Charlie talks about a revival, this comes to mind because the revival that Transcendental Meditation provides has not been firmly established. It's lost interest in a sense. It had a big rush in the 70s and 80s and started to dwindle off. And this has been a concern for me now that I've noticed and realized how much an impact it has had on society and how much of a loss for the people initiated who don't keep it up. And I'll tell you, I guess it requires a dedication. What more can be said? Yet it's a dedication to silence twice a day, roughly speaking. I mean, as a general statement, along the lines of how practitioners have been taught. So the outlook is not grim. The outlook is actually very robust, and it can only get better. And so this is a very good sign that, in all likelihood, the purity of the teaching will last for a very long time, just the way Maharishi designed it and desired it. And usually the way he sees things is the way they are ideal, the way to actually do the thing and to solve the problem. It doesn't mean that people accept it right away, but in terms of the solution, he pretty much sees the whole problem as it is and can see the solution. And so the vision I had was a reassurance that his vision of the solution will come to be and I don't have to worry. And to me, this is a great deal of relief. So I don't consider myself equal to Charlie to include myself in this playlist, yet I couldn't help but share with you this vision, because he talked about visionaries, people who see things because they go within. And this was one of the features of my vision, was that it was at a time of bliss and inward directed vision in which I saw this, as well as the fact that I was dwelling on the problem and trying to focus on what its solutions are in a creative manner, in an objective manner, in a rational manner, considering the history of how and the experience of what little Charlie relayed to us what was happening in the movement at the time. So my focus was trying to be realistic on the one hand, but also keeping a positive frame of mind and trying to keep the goal in mind as well, and not trying to stray from the goal at its very fundamental basis, which was the numbers, is getting the numbers together in one place, duplicated twice more, to perform these obligations that they would have upon themselves on behalf of the rest of the population of the planet, for the sake of everyone else. Because that's literally what they are doing. They are serving selflessly for everyone.